Hello and welcome to the News at 7, where we get to the heart of the day's stories and communities across Scotland. Tonight, energy bills are going up again. We'll tell you what's changed and meet people struggling with the rising cost of living.
It's more than just gas and electricity that's gone up. In the last 2 years, it's over doubled, and that causes a lot of stress, and it pushes families like mine into debt.
Also tonight, we go inside a prison where they're putting up bars, not to keep prisoners in, but to keep drones out. And why are there so few statues of Scottish women? We'll have all the sport with Sheila. What have you got tonight?
Well, Fiona, it's a big week for Scottish clubs in Europe. We hear from Russell Martin, Brendan Rodgers and Jimmy Tilleen.
Yeah, and later we speak to Andy Murray as he swaps the tennis court for the golf course. I'm Fiona Stockert. Welcome to the News at 7. Hello. Rising gas and electricity prices have led to a 2% increase in bills for households. The energy regulator Ofgem has set the new level for winter period to the end of December, when homes use the most energy. Ofgem sets the maximum price that can be charged for each unit of gas and electricity. It does not cap individual energy bills. While a household using typical amounts of energy will now have to pay £1,755, an increase of £35. Here's the BBC's cost of living correspondent Coletta Smith to explain what's been going on.
There are two reasons why energy bills are going up today. The first one is because it's costing more to get that power to our homes. And the second reason is that we're all paying extra to cover the costs of a new government scheme that helps people on lower incomes to pay their energy bills. The first thing that you should do is submit a meter reading to make sure that you're charged the right amount of money, especially if you don't have a smart meter. The second thing that you should do is have a look around to see what fixed deals are available to you. Take the time to do that in the next day or two.
So those are a couple of things some of us can do to help, but for some people it's just another price increase that's making life unaffordable. Well, earlier I visited the Star Project in Paisley to find out how people there are coping with rising costs. What are your children aware of then, when you're having to make these choices, do you think?
I would have thought they would have been used to it. It would have just been second nature to them because we've been doing it for so long. My old house, for the 9 years we lived in there, it was no boiler at all. Not even the electricity. The council gave us these wee fans, £10 a day to run the fans to heat the houses up. So I would have thought they would have been used to it, but now they're older, they're coming in and saying, by God, it's cold now, Can we start putting our jackets on? And nobody really wants to go to bed with jackets.
Kim, bills have gone up just today, energy prices. What kind of challenges does that present for you and your family and the choices?
A full reworked budget. Again, a budget we're having to shuffle around every couple of months now, because it is more than just gas and electricity that's gone up. But the alarming thing is in the last 2 years, it's over doubled for gas and electricity in our house. We have 4 kids to keep warm, can't let the house get cold, but at the same time, we have to pay the bills too. And that's not always easy, and that causes a lot of stress, and it pushes families like mine into debt. Loan companies, credit cards, they will give you it. They will let you spend it and then they will hound you for it. So while you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, there's a debt collector at the door looking for the money you took from Jacob, and it's causing fractures in families.
Energy bills have gone up again today, Heather. Some people would say it's not a lot over a year, but actually what kind of challenges does that present to the people that you're supporting?
It is going to cause a huge challenge to people, and anyone who's saying that's not a lot have clearly never struggled to pay a bill or feed themselves. We are really frustrated that we're hearing this, well, it's only 2% and it's only 2%, but on everything else over the past few years that it's just increasing, because it's not just energy prices, it's food prices, it's all of these things that come together to make people feel actually quite hopeless, and they're all really struggling. So we are happy to hear about the home warm discount coming out. That's great, but that's a small fix, and we're really sick of these small fixes because people can't plan their lives based on quick fixes. They just can't. We need people to be bold and actually look at the cost of living crisis and think about it from the perspective of the most vulnerable. That's the most important.
Well, the High Court has ordered a company linked to the Conservative peer Baroness Michelle Mone to pay back £122 million for breaching a contract to supply surgical gowns during the pandemic. The Department of Health sued the firm, called PPE MedPro, arguing that the gowns provided were not sterile. Baroness Mone called the High Court judgment a win for the establishment. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, said that Baroness Mone clearly shouldn't be in the House of Lords. Zoe Conway reports.
More than 5 years ago, and hospitals were in the grip of the COVID crisis. The sheer number of patients placing a severe strain on NHS resources. There was an urgency to get personal protective equipment, PPE, to deal with the emergency. Early on in the pandemic, Doug Barrowman, Michelle Mone's husband, led a consortium to set up PPE MedPro, which in mid-2020 is awarded a £122 million contract to supply 25 million sterile surgical gowns. That December, Baroness Mone's lawyers say she had no role or function in PPE MedPro, nor in the process by which contracts were awarded to the company. That same month, the Department of Health rejected the gowns for being unsterile. Nearly a year later, government documents refer to Baroness Mone as the source of referral for the company. Michelle Mone became one of the most famous entrepreneurs in the country through her lingerie company. She ended up in the House of Lords. In court, it emerged she'd lobbied officials and ministers during the pandemic to get the PPE contracts over the line.
I wasn't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes.
It was not until this interview with Laura Kuenssberg in 2023 that Baroness Mone admitted she was a future beneficiary of the £65 million profit made by the company during the pandemic.
I can't see what we've done wrong. Doug and the consortium have simply delivered a contract, a delivery contract of goods.
But after everything, you can't see what you've done wrong when you've admitted today that you lied to the press. And
that's not a crime.
Mrs Justice Sarah Cockrell said the company should pay back £122 million to the government because the gowns had not reached the required sterility standards. But the company went into administration yesterday.
That money belongs in our public services, and I want to be clear, anyone who got a government contract, either during COVID or at other times where the contract was not being fulfilled, we will come after that money. That is taxpayers' money.
Michelle Mone and Doug Barrowman have called the judgment a travesty of justice and said the company had been made scapegoats by the government. Zoe Conway, BBC News.
A Calmac ferry serving Arran that has been out of action for 20 months for repairs costing more than £12 million is to return to service. The MB Caledonian is one of the main vessels serving the Arran route and it resumes sailing from Ardrossan this evening. Suzanne Allen reports.
Well, this is really good news if you live in Ardrossan or on Arran, as they have been without a reliable, regular ferry service for the past year. There have been sailings to Arran, but they've been going from Troon on the new Glensannox, which came into service earlier this year, but it's too big to dock here at Ardrossan. So the MV Caledonian Isles was back tonight. She made her first crossing at 5 p.m. and earlier I spoke to the Calmac chief executive on board the ship and he told me of his relief.
I'm looking forward to getting to the point where she's back into service, and in particular that means we're back up to full strength in the fleet, which we haven't been for a long time, and island communities have been paying the price for that.
The Caledonian Isles has been out of service for 20 months and has cost more than £12 million to repair. Now, the ship's long absence has caused major economic difficulties. That's according to the Save Ardrossan Harbour Group, who say restaurants and shops have been much quieter, and they're hoping that the redevelopment of the harbour will go ahead.
It's been depressing seeing the harbour empty after nearly 200 years of the harbour having ships coming in and out, and it's been reduced to nothing. So it's been quite difficult, and looking forward to the future, if this purchase goes through and the work can then be carried out, it shows there'll be a prosperous future for Ardrossan, but that work must be carried out, and it seems that the only way to do so is for the harbour to be transferred into public ownership.
So negotiations are underway to redevelop the harbour, and that would mean that much bigger ships would be able to berth here safely.
Now let's get a roundup of the stories making the BBC News app in Scotland. A double racist who faked his own death and fled to Spain has been jailed for 8 years. Former gym boss James Clacher used dating apps to prey on women. A driver's died after his lorry spilled a load of timber from a motorway bridge in Glasgow. Police Scotland are investigating whether the 61-year-old man took ill at the wheel. And staff at NHS Fife involved in a legal case over single-sex spaces have now been told to use facilities which correspond with the sex at birth over their gender identity. And for more information on all these stories, you can scan the QR code on the screen now. It'll take you to the BBC Scotland News website. Now, cages have been fitted over the windows of cells at an Edinburgh prison as part of a pilot project to combat the problem of drones being used to deliver drugs and weapons into jails. As BBC Scotland News revealed in May, the scheme was first introduced in Perth Prison to help dismantle organised crime networks. The governor of HMB Edinburgh says illegal drone deliveries only add to the problems caused by overcrowding and gang culture. Scotland's prison populations climbed further today to 8,368. The BBC's Victoria Derbyshire went to the jail to find out more.
There are two big gangs or criminal groups, organised criminal groups in Scotland, and those groups are reflected in the prison population here. You've got some of those members of those groups here. How difficult does that make things for you and your staff?
Really challenging. So on a really basic level, it is difficult to ensure that individuals from rival groups are kept separate, and that's in order to keep people safe. We don't want people getting involved in violence. So on a basic level, it's difficult in making sure that people still have access to a range of activities, but they do so safely, and we keep people apart. On a more complex level, organised crime brings lots of issues within prison. So we have individuals who will continue to not just direct, but build their criminal network while they're in prison.
So they're actually expanding it.
They're expanding.
Once inside.
Yes, they will come into prison, they will try and recruit new members.
What is it that keeps you awake at night as a governor of a big jail? Staff getting hurt. Really?
Yeah.
How often does that happen?
Fortunately, it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it tends to be quite serious, and that can have lasting impact for staff, both physically and on their mental health. It is a very stressful job, very stressful, and we see that in our levels of sick absence.
And what's the worst example of one of your team being hurt by an inmate, I assume?
Yeah, so we've had staff who have been slashed, both in the face, on the hand.
With a knife?
With a blade.
A blade,
with a blade. We've had staff have had hot water mixed with sugar, which makes it stick to the skin.
And so that's been made inside?
Manufactured within the prison, yes.
So what's that, a pen?
No, that's probably a piece of bar from a bed.
Okay.
That they've managed to snap off, secure it to just a tiny bit of block of wood.
Right.
And then wrap some bedding around it for a handle.
Right.
That is just watch that end sharp, because that's razor blades at that end, so that's a piece of TV aerial that's then been, or radio aerial, sorry, that's then been manufactured into a weapon.
Okay, and what is this, Duncan, this contraption, what is it?
Over here, this is an improvised device for when they fill the drones into the cell windows.
Right, so they open the cell windows, stick that out and grab it with this hook, yeah? Hence the new grills, which make that a lot harder to get out.
Impossible for them
Impossible,
to get out.
right, yeah. How accessible are drugs in here?
For 90% of the time it's easy valuable. There's drugs to hand any point in time.
What kind of drugs?
Any drugs, your cannabis, you've got your legal highs, things like that.
They are at crisis point now, and I don't think the way that we are operating just now is not sustainable. We cannot continue to operate with the number of people that we have.
How many are in this prison today?
We unlocked 903 this morning. Our design capacity is 867.
Right.
And 903 is probably the lowest that we have been for quite some time.
Right, but you're still over
but
capacity.
Still over capacity.
And what does that mean in terms of your staff, cells, how many people are sharing a cell?
Overpopulated prisons are really difficult to work in, so it places extra demands on all the services. It's not good for the general public because we are not rehabilitating and we're sending people back out into communities presenting the same risk as they did when they first came into prison.
That's interesting that you put it like that, because there might be some people watching who say, so what if somebody's committed a horrific crime and they're locked in their cell 24/7? Who cares? But your point is, if they come out not having been rehabilitated, the likelihood is they'll reoffend, they'll be straight back in, and it's a revolving door.
Absolutely, and you've got another victim. Someone else has been harmed.
Yeah.
Victoria Derbyshire reporting there, and you can watch more of that story tonight on Newsnight, 10:30 on BBC Two and iPlayer. Still to come, we'll have weather with Christopher, but now it's sport with Sheila.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, it's a big week for Scotland's 3 clubs in Europe. Let's start with Rangers. Russell Martin got the league win he so desperately needed against Livingston last weekend. Now he needs to get their Europa League campaign moving. They face Sturm Graz in Austria tomorrow night. And Paul Barnes is there for us. Paul, you've just been at Russell Martin's press conference. What was he saying this evening?
Well, his mood was one of, at times, frustration, sometimes a little bit upbeat and sometimes a little bit defensive. And I think that was because the media conference was yet again dominated largely by questions about his own future and this unrelenting scrutiny that he's facing at the moment from a large section of the Rangers supporters following a disappointing start to the season. Some fans have been wanting him sacked for almost up to a month now following a string of poor results. But that criticism took on another twist at the weekend in highly unusual circumstances, something I don't think I've really ever seen before at a football match. Rangers scored a last-minute injury time winner, their first Premiership victory of the season. But just seconds after the ball hitting the net and the euphoria that comes with this, a lot of the Rangers supporters at the match were calling for Martin's dismissal. As I say, a very unusual situation. Martin was asked about it in his media conference in the last hour or so, and this is what he had to say.
I just wish at that point they can enjoy their team winning, and the lads can enjoy it a bit more rather than having that energy towards me. And the only other thing I find sad is when when I see the kids standing next to their dads and stuff and sticking their fingers up at me and swearing at me, and I don't feel particularly sad about it for me. I just feel like for the cycle to go on and to understand. And like, I'm here, we've made mistakes, there's been some tough moments, but we're giving everything we've got to improve the club, as is Kevin, as is Patrick, as are the owners. And I think when you have so much change, I've said it before, it's not an excuse, but I think it's pretty evident it might take some time.
And Paul, all this scrutiny of Russell Martin and his future, it all comes ahead of what is a huge game for Rangers, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge game for Rangers, even more so because they lost their first Europa League game at home to Genk 1-0 last week. Sturm Graz also lost their opening match against Michelin, so 2 clubs hoping to get their first Europa League points on the board. And this is a competition that Rangers have done really well in the last 5 years or so. They got to the quarter-finals last season and got all the way to the final in Seville a few years before that. So a really big occasion for Russell Martin, for his future, for the Rangers players and Rangers team, who are really trying to build a bit of momentum at a really difficult stage of the season. I'll be back on Reporting Scotland at 7 tomorrow night with all the latest team news ahead of kick-off.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, a huge night tomorrow. And Celtic are also in Europa League action tomorrow night. They welcome Portuguese side Braga. Disaffected fans are planning another protest against the board in the first half of the match. Some supporters will stay silent to demonstrate against how the club is being run. Manager Brendan Rodgers says he hopes both sides can sort out their differences.
Well, I think our focus is pretty much on the performance on the pitch. That is the only thing that we can control. You know, I really hope that the stadium is full, and because that's what Celtic is about for me. It's an incredible club, and our history is based around our supporters. And I suppose my message is probably for the longer term is that, you know, both parties can sit down and respect the differences and find a solution so that we can all pull together again.
Jimmy Tilleen will be hoping Aberdeen's Conference League campaign can provide some relief from their woeful start to the Premiership. They host Ukrainian side Shakhtar Donetsk tomorrow night. Tilleen says the match is a chance to turn things around at Pittodrie.
I think this night is always special, especially on Pittodrie. So Europe is really important for our players and our club to be there and also perform there. So that's another focus, but still the domestic league is also super important. We know that. So, but right now we focus on this game.
More on all these big games on the BBC Sports Scotland website, where you can also read all about Scotland head coach Gregor Townsend's new advisory role at Newcastle. Plenty on the go, Fiona.
Plenty on the go. A lot of managers under a lot of pressure.
Sure is.
They're not in their shoes. Thank you so much, Sheila. Now, keen golfers from the world of music, film and other sports have been getting close to some of the Ryder Cup winners at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships today. Well, Louise Hosey caught up with one of them in St Andrews.
Swapping centre court for the old course. Tennis legend Andy Murray is among the famous faces taking part in this year's Alfred Dunhill Links Championship. The Pro-Am golf event, which is staged across St Andrews, Carnoustie and Kingsbarns, is a big draw for stars of other sports.
I mean, I'm not planning on becoming a golf professional or anything, or trying to do anything like that, but I love it. It's pretty unique, really. I don't think you've got anything like this in other sports. So yeah, for an amateur golfer like me to get to even just be on the practice range with some of these guys is amazing, but to get to play a round of golf with them at some of the best golf courses in the world is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. That was Louise Cowie reporting there. Now, you can hardly walk down a street in some parts of Scotland without passing a statue. Big, small, metal, stone. They come in all shapes and sizes. The one thing they have in common is that they're all nearly statues of men. Well, that's slowly changing. A new monument is being put up in Edinburgh, celebrating the achievements of Dr. Elsie Ingalls. She established maternity services for poor women and ran all-female hospitals during World War I. So why are there so few statues of women? Well, I asked Sarah Sheridan. She's the author of a book called Where Are the Women? A Guide to an Imagined Scotland.
It's a very complicated question. I think that part of the reason for that is a kind of Georgian and Victorian and into the 20th century, which is sort of the golden age of statues, when all of our urban statues, or many of our urban statues, went up. It was considered kind of too much for a lady to be in the spotlight. If you were a lady, you didn't want the attention. And so it was kind of considered a private matter if a lady achieved something or a lady did something. And this public memorialisation would have been almost embarrassing. And I think that is certainly part of it, but not all of it.
And it's not just statues, though, is it? Tell me about the kind of wider picture of the lack of visibility.
There is just a total lack of visibility. So statues-wise, across the UK, the average is 3% in cities of statues. So 97% are not of women. Edinburgh actually falls below that 3% mark. There are very famously more statues of named animals in Edinburgh than there are to named women, and no statues in central Edinburgh to non-royal women.
Incredible. So you mentioned that particular period of time. What else adds to that picture?
Well, street names. So there are city centres that are laid out, the street names are put down, then it's very difficult to change street names. So certainly street names, and even lower sort of terms of memorialisation, like benches, for example, or naming buildings or lecture halls or any of these things. We do have just examples within Scotland of some of these being named after women, but again, it's nowhere near 50-50. And I think there is a kind of assumption that maybe our grannies didn't do very much.
So what's the impact of this, do you think?
Well, I think of myself as a kid, you know, walking in Edinburgh. I was a child brought up in Edinburgh, and we would walk along George Street. I have two brothers, and we would all walk along George Street, and everything is named after men. Everything is for men. The statues there are all of men. And I think of the difference that would have been if I, as a child, had been walking along that street and seen images of women who had achieved.
Since you've been writing about this, and this lady in particular, do you think things are getting any better?
I think they are. I think it's slow but sure. So the first call for women's votes was in 1747. That was achieved in 1919. So there's 172 years it took to get women the vote. So I think one of the things that this tells us is the patriarchy is strong, and that cultural change and real social and cultural change is in fact very, very slow.
Interesting. I'm lobbying for a statue of Dolly Parton. Anyway, Storm Blanchett has just blown into the studio and is with us now, aren't you?
It's turning really stormy through the end of the week, actually, yes, with the first named storm of the season. Today wasn't too bad. Lots of pictures from our weather watchers, as ever. A lovely picture there from the far north, Dunnet. And the rather large puddles at times, because we did have quite a wet start to the day, didn't we, before that rain eased off, and there is more rain on the way. Let me show you what's happening over the next few days. We've got a waving weather front moving in off the Atlantic, bringing pulses of wet weather. Hopefully I can show you that in a moment. And that is just going to mean some fairly heavy and persistent rain over the next few days, all connected to each other, these weather systems, and they are going to bring some fairly heavy and persistent rain. There we go, we got there in the end. And there's the waving weather front that I was talking about, working its way in off the Atlantic and bringing some fairly heavy and persistent rain. In fact, we have a Met Office yellow warning overnight tonight, and that is with us right through until Friday. So overnight tonight, cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and those rain totals mounting up in the west with some localised flooding potentially. Temperatures, though, on the mild side, 13 or 14 Celsius. That takes us to tomorrow. It's a cloudy and a damp start with outbreaks of rain, pulses of rain coming and going through the course of the day. Like today, the best chance of any brighter weather will be around the Murray coast. Now, as we head in towards the middle part of the day and the afternoon, you can see that rain over my shoulder there really intensifying where we have that warning area. Elsewhere, cloudy with rain at times. Temperatures 16 or 17 Celsius, perhaps a bit of brightness towards the Murray coast, northern Aberdeenshire, and outbreaks of rain there in towards Orkney and Shetland as well. And as we go in towards tomorrow evening, that rain will continue to intensify, becoming persistent. But as well as the rain, we need to think about the storm that's coming. And we've had two hurricanes out in the Atlantic. There they are swirling around. They're not coming our way, but a pulse of wet weather from one of them will, scooped up by the jet stream. That'll rapidly deepen it. And that is what is Storm Amy coming our way on Friday, as well as the high winds, some heavy rain. So another Met Office yellow warning over an extended area. So it's a two-pronged attack, if you like. First thing, though, the calm before the storm. Friday morning, dry with a bit of brightness around. Then through the afternoon, the cloud builds, the winds strengthen and the rain arrives. That is the first sign of Storm Amy. And it will bring widespread gales or severe gales, maybe storm force at times. And because the trees are in full leaf, we could see some trees and branches come down because of those wind strengths, some damage to buildings, flying debris, power cuts, certainly travel disruption. And you can see overnight through the early hours some damaging winds with severe gales likely. And it remains windy into Saturday too, with heavy rain. So a really wild spell of weather coming our way overnight Friday and into Saturday. That's the forecast for now.
OK, Christopher, just a quick one though. Where's the worst areas? Worst hit at what time?
Well, that's a very good question. At the moment, the weather models are not in entire agreement, but we think probably across parts of the west and the northwest of the country is where the strongest of the wind gusts are going to be. But if you've got any garden furniture or trampolines, this is the early warning to tie them down and put them away, because it will be a wild spell of weather as we head overnight Friday into Saturday.
Good tips, the trampoline owners in Scotland. Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. And keep up to the weather, obviously, on the BBC Scotland News website. That is it from us tonight. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to the team in the studio and the gallery. The 7 will be back same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, keep up to date on the website. I'll see you on Drive Time tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.